The morning sun spilled across the windows, casting long stripes of light onto the scratched tile floor. Mr. Callahan adjusted his tie with one hand and sipped cooling coffee with the other, his gaze trailing lazily across the rows of desks as the first students shuffled in. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk dust and old radiator heat, mingling with the scent of cheap deodorant and rain-soaked coats. It was a kind of Tuesday that already felt like a Thursday, slow, dull, heavy with routine. He greeted them one by one. "Morning, Grace." "Good to see you, Eli." "Quiet down, everyone." The same routine, the same sequence. Ninth grade English, the most predictable hour of his day. He turned to a whiteboard and began writing symbolism in modern literature when a sudden cold draft touched the back of his neck. He paused, glanced toward the open window, but it was shut, sealed since September. Strange. His eyes traveled to the far back corner of the room, to the seat behind the last row, the one near the supply cabinet no one ever opened. A boy sat there. Not unusual at first glance. Thin, pale, head lowered as if reading something in his lap. Callahan blinked. There was something wrong with the light around that corner. The sun had shifted, but the boy sat in shadow. A full, motionless shadow that didn't change, didn't soften, didn't belong. He tried to place him. No name came. No memory of a voice or a raised hand or an essay turned in. He wasn't sure he'd ever spoken to that student at all. Callahan turned back to the board, his hand faltering slightly. "Now, let's look at what the river represents in Chapter 4. His voice felt too loud in the quiet room. Minutes passed. A cough, a rustle of papers, a snicker quickly stifled. He scanned the room again during reading time, pretending to check posture or engagement. Most students stared half-heartedly at their books. Some scribbled, some daydreamed. The boy in the shadow didn't move. His chair didn't creak. He didn't blink. And his face, when Callahan tried to focus on it, it was like remembering a dream while it slipped through your fingers. There were features, he was certain, but the details smeared together like fog on glass. The bell rang, sharp and shrill. Students stood, gathered their bags, laughed. A few lingered, asking about homework or making vague excuses for late assignments. Callahan answered automatically, eyes flicking to the back corner again. Empty. He walked slowly to the desk. The seat was cold, colder than it should have been. No books, no name tag, no jacket slung on the back, no sign anyone had sat there at all. A faint frown creased his brow. Maybe he was tired. Maybe it was someone new he hadn't registered yet. Subtle changes in lighting, shadows playing tricks. It wasn't unheard of, but the classroom felt wrong. Skewed, as if the walls were leaning in by a fraction. He shook his head and returned to his desk, opened his laptop to check the roster. 32 names. He read them all aloud under his breath, tapping each one like a mantra, but none of them made the shadow lift. The second period passed uneventfully. 10th grade composition, full of clumsy metaphors and half-hearted attempts at poetry. Mr. Callahan gave out feedback, chuckled where appropriate, corrected verb tenses. He even managed to forget, briefly, about the boy in the back corner. But by lunch, the thought had crept back in. He sat in the teacher's lounge, a gray room saturated with microwave leftovers and stale coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed above. Across from him, Mr. Delaney from history scrolled on his phone while chewing a dry sandwich. To Callahan's right, Ms. Brooks from science reorganized worksheets for the third time, the pages clicking rhythmically under her chipped nails. "Hey," Callahan said casually, "do we have a new student in the ninth grade group? Kinda tall, thin, quiet kid? Always sits in the back." Delaney didn't look up. "What's the name?" "That's the thing," Callahan said. I don't remember. I don't think I ever called on him." Ms. Brooks snorted softly. "You're getting old, Jack." "Seriously, though," he pressed, leaning forward. I looked at the roster. "I don't think he's on it." Now Delaney raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me there's a kid in your class every day and you don't know his name?" "I'm telling you," Callahan said, his voice lowering. "I've never talked to him. Never saw him turn in work. I think he's always there, and I just overlook him." Silence settled. Ms. Brooks stopped sorting. Delaney set his phone down. Maybe he's a floater, Brooks said after a pause. Some kids sneak into other classes to skip their own. Callahan shook his head. Then why would he always be in the same seat? Why would no one notice? They were both looking at him now, brows furrowed. Delaney's voice dropped. You okay, Jack? He offered a brittle smile. Yeah, just weird vibes today. He didn't finish his sandwich. Something in his stomach coiled tightly, like his body already knew what his mind refused to name. After lunch, he returned to an empty classroom. The third period bell hadn't rung yet. The room was hushed, heavy. He stood at the door a moment, listening. Not to sounds, but to the silence. The kind of silence that pressed behind your ears, made your own heartbeat feel intrusive. Slowly, he walked to the back corner. The chair was there. The desk, untouched. And for a moment, just a flicker, he thought he saw someone sitting there again, out of the corner of his eye. The suggestion of limbs, the slight indentation of weight on the seat. He turned quickly. Nothing, except a book. There was a book on the desk now. A copy of The Outsiders, worn and battered, the spine frayed, a name scribbled faintly on the inside cover in blue ink. But the ink had smudged. He squinted. The name was there, faded, water damaged, maybe. His eyes struggled to focus, like trying to read through a fog window. Letters emerged, then slid away. He could swear it started with an L, or maybe an I. Callahan ran a finger across it. The paper was cold. He snapped the book shut and carried it back to his desk. As students filed in, he set it aside. He took attendance carefully, calling out every name with deliberate clarity. Every student responded, but there were still 32 in the room. One of them, as always, remained in shadow. By fourth period, Mr. Callahan could no longer pretend it was just a fluke. The boy was there again. Same seat, same silence, same strange stillness like someone pressed pause on him and forgot to unpause. The class droned around him, voices rising and falling like tides, yet nothing touched that corner. The light avoided it. The air around it felt heavier, like an invisible wall sealed it off. Today, Callahan didn't try to teach. Not really. His mouth moved, words came out, but his eyes kept drifting. He caught himself staring at the boy so often he lost his place mid-sentence. And always, when he tried to really look, to pin down a detail, the shape of his face, the style of his hair, the color of his shirt, his mind would fumble. It was like trying to remember the tune of a song you just heard, knowing it meant something, but unable to hum a single note. Once, he tried to say something. He didn't plan to. The words slipped out between questions about Hemingway and metaphor. His voice faltered. Liam? The name came unbidden, without reason. A few students looked up in surprise. One girl raised a brow, then shrugged and went back to doodling. The boy didn't move. Callahan's throat felt dry. Liam, he repeated louder. Still nothing. He scanned the class list again later, during a bathroom break. He stared at the names, hoping for confirmation, some click of recognition. No Liam, no similar names. He even checked the yearbook archive online. During his prep hour, the class photos from earlier years blurred together. Every time he reached the bottom row, the last seat on the right, his eyes would slip past one face, as if his brain refused to see it. And yet, there he was, there, in last year's class, in the one before, always sitting in the far right seat in the back. Face slightly turned, expression unreadable. In every picture, his figure was just a little out of focus, like a camera had failed to catch him fully, as though he belonged to the picture only reluctantly. He closed the laptop, fingers trembling. After school, Callahan walked the hallway with a strange tension in his spine. The kids had all cleared out, their voices trailing into the bus loop and echoing faintly through corridors. The janitor's radio crackled somewhere down the hall, playing an old song that didn't quite mask the emptiness. He returned to the classroom, stood in the doorway, and stared at the boy's desk. The light was dimmer now. Evening settling in, the sky outside fading to bruised blue. Callahan stepped slowly into the room. That seat was still slightly askew from the others. like it had been dragged out just a little. He didn't remember anyone moving it. He approached the desk again. The book, The Outsiders, was gone. In its place, a folded piece of paper. He hesitated before picking it up. The fold was neat, deliberate. His name was written on the outside in small, precise letters. Mr. Callahan. Inside, a single sentence, printed in the same careful hand. You never asked me if I was supposed to be here. He turned sharply, heart hammering. The room was empty, but for a moment, just before the last light disappeared behind the horizon, he thought he saw movement in the glass reflection of the window, a figure standing behind him, too close. When he turned, the room was still, but the desk in the back was empty again. That night, Mr. Callahan barely slept. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the note unfolding over and over in his mind like a whisper through fog. You never asked me if I was supposed to be here. The words pulsed with a quiet accusation. Not angry, but heavy, disappointed. By morning, his head ached with unrest, and his hands felt slightly numb as he turned the key to his classroom door. The hallway was still mostly quiet, just a hum of early custodial work, the faint echo of someone laughing near the lockers. He stepped inside and stopped short. The desks were rearranged. Subtly, not enough for a casual glance to notice, but Callahan knew their rhythm. The neat rows he aligned every week, the pattern he'd memorized. Now the back corner desk had crept farther from the others, like an island eroding from the mainland. And that shadow, it was already there again before any student had entered. A deep, unmoving patch of darkness in a sunlit room. He dropped his bag, breath unsteady. Then, impulsively, he picked up the clipboard, the old one he rarely used anymore, and a pen. Today, he would really take attendance. Not from the online system, not skimming heads. By hand, one name at a time. No exceptions. As students filtered in, he stood by the door. Name? He asked each of them, eyes meeting theirs. Some raised eyebrows. Some joked, but they answered. Jessica Lynn, Carlos Mendez, Maya Reed, Eli Morrison. He checked them off, one by one, even the late ones. Even the ones who usually slipped past with mumbled, "Hey." Today, he caught them all. 31 names. He sat at his desk, letting them settle into their morning noise. Pretended to open an email. Waited. And then there was movement in the corner. The chair scraped. He looked up. The boy was there again, in his usual place, the 32nd student, sitting quietly, hands on his lap, not reading, not writing, just waiting. Callahan stood. His knees ached with the effort. He crossed the room slowly, aware of every step. Students didn't seem to notice. A few glanced up, but no one watched him long. He stopped beside the desk. Up close, the boy looked wrong. His face didn't blur like before, not exactly, but it shifted, slightly, imperceptibly, like someone turning a dial just beneath the skin. His features hovered on the edge of familiarity, like a face you've seen once in a dream. Callahan tried to speak. His mouth was dry. "What's your name?" he finally asked, voice low. The boy didn't look up. His head was bowed. "I need your name," Callahan repeated. The boy turned his head slightly, as if listening. Then, without raising his eyes, he said, "You already knew it once." Callahan's throat tightened. I don't think I did." A silence stretched between them, long enough for the rest of the room to grow distant, like a backdrop peeling away. "You stop remembering," the boy said very quietly. "So I stayed here." Callahan backed away, heart beating too fast, too shallow. He turned and walked straight out of the room. He went to the front office. "Can I see the archive class lists?" he asked the secretary, trying to sound calm. She blinked at him. "For which year?" "Every year," he said. "Going back 5, maybe 6. He made a joke about misplacing an old file. She gave him a look, but handed over the binder. He sat down in the office corner, flicking through the pages. Dozens of names. Familiar ones. Former students. Memories flooding back in half-formed scenes. Then he saw it. For years ago. 9th grade. Last name, Langley, first name Isaac. A sharp jolt of recognition struck through his ribs. Isaac Langley, the quiet boy, always at the back, never raised his hand, always pale, always reading, always there, and then gone. No transfer, no expulsion, no graduation. Just one day, no longer present. No one talked about it. No one had noticed. Except now, somehow, Isaac Langley was sitting in his classroom again, 4 years too late, and no one else remembered. Mr. Callahan sat alone at the back of the library long after the lunch bell had rung. The air buzzed softly from overhead lights, and the hum of distant chatter from the cafeteria barely reached this far. He flipped through old yearbooks, each turn of the page accompanied by a growing sense of dread. Isaac Langley. He whispered the name once, quietly, just to see how it fell on his tongue. It was like tasting something long forgotten, familiar, yet wrong. A ghost of a name, suspended in dust and ink. He found a ninth-grade photo from 4 years ago. There was a class in all its awkward poses and forced smiles. Callahan traced the rows with his finger. Their bottom row, second from the end, the seat that always lined up with the back right desk in his classroom. The figure was there, as always, but the name beneath was missing. Not crossed out, not whited out, just blank, the only blank. Every other student had their name printed below their face in clean Helvetica. But Isaac's place was an absence, a perfect omission. He leaned closer, as if proximity could force the truth to cohere. The face was slightly out of focus again. Not distorted, just uninterested in being seen. He flipped to the next year's photo. 10th grade. Isaac should have moved on, to another teacher, another room. But there he was again, same place, same seat, in the same clothes. Even the rest of the students had changed. Haircuts, braces gone, height differences. But Isaac Langley hadn't aged a day. No name. Again, Callahan's stomach twisted. He looked down at his own notes, scrawled on a napkin he grabbed from the teacher's lounge. Isaac Langley sat in back, quiet, never spoke, disappeared? But something about the last word felt wrong. Disappeared implied a moment, a leaving. But Isaac never left. He just stopped being noticed. Back in the classroom, the air felt brittle, like static hung just beneath the surface of things. The students had moved on with their day. Only a few remained after school, serving detention or waiting for rides. Callahan sat at his desk, staring at the corner again. The seat was empty, but it wasn't vacant. He could feel it now more than see it, like a pressure behind his eyes. He reached into the drawer, pulled out the attendance clipboard again. Slowly, he flipped back to the days of the current school year. The same 31 names checked and rechecked. Isaac's name never there, but his presence unmissable now that he was paying attention. The lights above flickered once. Just once. A blink, but enough. Callahan stood. He walked to the desk in the corner and sat down, in Isaac's seat. The perspective was strange. The classroom looked different from here, skewed. He could see dust gather beneath the radiator, a crack in the wall behind the supply cabinet. He noticed how none of the other desks ever pointed toward this one. Subtle angles, as if they had turned away instinctively. He reached down. His fingers touched something taped beneath the desk. A piece of paper. Dry. Fragile. The edges curled inward like it had been there for years. He pulled it free. It was a photograph. One of the group class shots from 4 years ago. He held it up. The image was the same as the one in the yearbook. Except here, Isaac's face was fully visible. Clear, pale, eyes dark and deep as ink, staring directly at the camera. But his expression, not fear, not sadness, something else. Resentment, and something colder beneath it. Something enduring. Scrawled on the back of the photo in the same handwriting as the note from before were 5 words. You never said my name. Callahan's breath caught. Behind him, a chair creaked. Not just any chair. That chair. Slowly, mechanically, he turned his head. Isaac Langley was sitting at the front of the room now, facing him, eyes locked, unblinking, as if the roles had been reversed. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden bars across the floor, stretching toward the desk where Mr. Callahan sat frozen, fingers tightening around the photograph. His mouth was dry, tongue thick behind clenched teeth. Across the room, Isaac sat, no longer in his usual seat, but at the front of class, facing him with that same flat, relentless stare. The temperature in the room had dropped. Not sharply, not like in ghost stories, but gradually, like someone had opened a window to let something in. Callahan stood slowly, the chair leg scraping against the linoleum with a teeth-gritting screech. The sound didn't make Isaac flinch. He held up the photograph. "Why now?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Why are you back?" Isaac blinked once. It was deliberate, too slow to be natural. Then, for the first time in all the years, he spoke aloud in the classroom. "You never noticed when I was here," he said. "But you notice now, when it's too late." The voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. It was like sound delivered straight into Callahan's thoughts. Measured, icy. There was no malice in it. Only fact. The kind that couldn't be debated. "I didn't mean to forget," Callahan said. Isaac tilted his head. "Didn't you?" The weight of the question crushed him. He thought of those long months 4 years ago. How busy he'd been. How many students he juggled. How many quiet ones he let fade into the background. He remembered vaguely thinking that Isaac hadn't shown up one day, and then thinking about it less and less, until he thought of something else entirely. Isaac didn't move, didn't breathe. "I checked the records," Callahan said, desperate now. "You're not enrolled. Not anymore. You shouldn't be here." "I am here," Isaac replied calmly. "That's the problem." The fluorescent lights above them flickered again. A low hum began, almost like tinnitus, barely audible but rising in pitch. "You want me to remember?" Callahan asked. "Is that it?" Isaac didn't answer. Instead, the classroom door creaked open behind Callahan. Slow and deliberate, he turned, pulse hammering. No one, but the hallway was wrong. It wasn't the warm yellow light of sunset. It was night now, or something deeper than night. The corridor was impossibly dark, like someone had poured ink down it. And inside that blackness, he saw something move, something with a shape just human enough to make his skin crawl. Callahan slammed the door shut, heart racing. He turned back. The classroom was empty. No Isaac, no backpack, no chair at the front of the room. But on every desk now lay a single, identical paper. Callahan walked slowly, each step ringing too loud. Each paper bore the same short answer prompt, typed in block letters. "Describe someone your teacher forgot." The handwriting on each sheet was different. Different pens, different slants, different students. But every answer said the same name. Isaac Langley. Over and over. Dozens of times. He stumbled back to his desk, panic overtaking reason. He opened the attendance system on his laptop, frantically typing into the search field. Isaac Langley. The system spun. No results. He tried again. Langley. Still nothing. Then, without him touching anything, the list of students on his current roster began to scroll on its own. And there it was. Langley, Isaac, seat 32, present. Dated for every day of the school year. Even the first week, when Callahan swore he didn't see him at all. His ears filled with low, hollow sound, like wind through a long, narrow tunnel. Or a breath, closed behind him. He turned again. This time, the door wasn't just closed. It was gone. Only a blank wall remained. And behind him, from the back seat where Isaac had always sat, came the quiet creak of someone leaning forward. Callahan could no longer tell what time it was. The windows had gone black, not dark with night, but with something denser, like tar had pressed itself against the glass. His classroom was sealed in, a box inside a box. Time held its breath. The silence deepened until even the small sounds, the hum of electronics, the tick of the clock, dropped away. Only that breath behind him remained. He turned. The classroom was filled again, but not with his students. Each desk was occupied by a figure, their heads bowed, unmoving, as if frozen mid-exam. Not statues. He could see subtle movements. The twitch of a finger, the rise and fall of a backward breath. but their faces, they weren't right. The skin was too smooth, the angles too soft. Each of them had a strange sameness, like placeholder people, mannequins dressed in echoes of old students, haircuts that had gone out of style, outfits that belonged to different years. Callahan took a step back, bumping against his desk. The figures didn't react, didn't speak. They just were. Only one desk was empty, the far back right, Isaac's seat. Then the lights buzzed sharp and hot and went out entirely. Total dark. But even in the blackness, Callahan knew he was no longer alone at the front of the room. He felt it, not just watched, remembered, like something vast and quiet had stepped into the space just behind his eyes. A voice came not aloud but inside him, threaded into his breath. Say it. He flinched. The whisper was low and patient, like the slow drip of water in a cave. Say my name. Callahan's throat ached. His lips were numb. He tried to speak, but found himself choking on air. Not from fear, from guilt, a deep, bone-rooted shame that clamped down on his voice. He tried again. Isaac, he whispered. The dark pulled closer, tighter, like something leaned in to listen. I remember you, Callahan said, stronger this time. You were quiet. You always sat in the back. You read during lunch. You like mythology. You never raise your hand. He felt something shift. The lights flickered once, for half a heartbeat, and the classroom snapped back into view. All the desks were empty again, except for Isaac's. And Isaac was there, watching with those dark, glassy eyes. For the first time, Callahan saw the boy clearly. Truly, not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a child. Just a boy, pale skin, dark, heavy hair, thin wrists poking from the sleeves of a too large hoodie. He looked exhausted, not in body, in being, like he'd been waiting so long he'd forgotten what it was like not to. I'm sorry, Callahan said. Isaac blinked slowly. You were supposed to help, he said, voice almost gentle. I know. The words came fast now, almost tripping over themselves. I don't know why I forgot. I don't know how. You were there every day, weren't you? I was. Callahan felt himself sinking to a chair, knees suddenly weak. Did you try to talk to me? Did you ever? I tried everything, Isaac said softly. But when people don't see you, you stop existing in pieces. The hands first, then the voice, then the face. His eyes gleamed. Then you don't know what part of you is real anymore. Silence folded over them. Callahan couldn't breathe. I see you now, he said. I remember you. Isaac nodded once. Then maybe you can help me leave. Leave where? Isaac's gaze didn't shift. This place, this room, this day. Callahan looked at the door. Still just wall. Still no way out. Isaac stood, slowly. I've been trying for 4 years, he said. But no one ever remembered long enough. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled something out. A key. Old. Brass. Cold looking. He held it out. You'll know where it fits, Isaac said. And then as the darkness thickened again at the edges of the room, the boy began to vanish, not dissolve, not fade, but unwrite himself, like ink sinking backward into paper, until only the key remained, resting on the desk. The key was heavier than it looked. Mr. Callahan turned it in his hand, the metal cold against his palm, edges worn smooth by time or by use. There was no inscription, no label, no hint of what it might open, just a silent weight, humming with quiet intention. The classroom had changed again, not visibly, not in layout, but in atmosphere. The walls felt closer, the air staler, like it had been sealed for decades. The shadows didn't shift with the light anymore. They clung to their places like stains. He walked slowly toward the back of the room, toward Isaac's desk. The chair was still there, slightly askew. The desk was closed, but something tugged at his thoughts, a memory not entirely his. Callahan knelt and ran his hand underneath. The lock was there, hidden in the wood beneath the desktop, perfectly flush, almost invisible. But when his fingers brushed it, the key pulsed faintly in his hand, like it recognized home. He slid it in. It turned easily. The underside of the desk clicked, and the surface split with a soft hiss, like a vacuum seal breaking. A seam opened, revealing a narrow drawer carved deep into the wood. Inside was a stack of papers, old, yellowed, edges curling. A few photographs, a cloth bracelet, a library card, a broken pencil, all tagged with masking tape, scrawled names barely legible. Memories, things that should have been kept safe by someone, anyone, and at the very bottom, a small spiral notebook. On the cover, written in childish block letters, things I want to say. Callahan opened it. The pages were filled with Isaac's handwriting, neat at first, then deteriorating. Each entry a short paragraph, some crossed out, some shaky. Mr. Callahan smiled at me today. I think you remember my name. I tried to join the group project, but they didn't hear me when I asked. I raised my hand the whole class. My arm hurt. I think I'm disappearing. The final entry read, "If someone ever sees me again, I hope they remember I was here, that I was real. I just wanted to be known." Callahan's vision blurred. He closed the notebook carefully, as though the wrong motion might scatter Isaac's last thoughts in the air like ash. He stood up. The classroom lights dimmed again, but this time it felt different, less oppressive, more like dusk before true night. And then, a door, where the wall had been, faint, shimmering, as though the world had redrawn itself to make space. It looked like the door to the old boiler room in the West Wing, but older, out of time, wooden, iron-braced, the kind of door you find in dreams or cellars. One that creaks not from hinges, but from memory. Callahan walked toward it. His steps were silent now, weightless. He reached for the handle. The key fit here, too. It turned. The door opened. Inside was only shadow, but not suffocating. It looked peaceful, still, like the space between thoughts. And in the center, standing small and still, was Isaac. He was just a boy again, not waiting, not hollow, just there. He looked up at Callahan and smiled. The first time. Small, honest, no resentment, no ache, just relief. "Thank you," he said. Then he turned and the shadows took him, not swallowed him, received him, welcomed him back into the shape of the world. Callahan stood alone in the frame of the open door for a long time. Then he closed it gently. When he turned back, the classroom was empty. Truly, no darkness in the windows, no lingering breath on the air, just dust and light and quiet. The next morning, Isaac Langley's name was gone from the attendance sheet. No record, no note, no deletion, just the absence of something that had finally found rest. But Mr. Callahan remembered.